Rain fell like whispered secrets over the cobblestone courtyard of the Greco estate. The iron gates stood sentinel against the Milan night, and somewhere beyond the manicured hedges, a small heartbeat quickened. Antonio Greco stepped from his armored vehicle, his leather shoes meeting wet stone, the Italian script tattooed across his knuckles catching the lamplight. La Famiglia Prima. Family first. He moved toward the grand entrance, thoughts heavy with blood money and darker debts, when something small and golden emerged from the shadows. A puppy, trembling, soaked, following. He paused. The creature should have run. Everything runs from Antonio Greco, but this one looked at him like it had been searching for him its entire short life, like it knew something he didn't, and in that moment, fate wrapped its invisible fingers around both their throats. Sometimes the smallest things carry the heaviest truths. Sometimes love finds us in the most unexpected forms. If stories of redemption and unexpected connection move your soul, please like, share, and subscribe. The puppy was perhaps 3 months old. Golden retriever mixed with something smaller, softer. Its fur was matted with rain and neglect, ribs visible beneath the damp coat. Antonio stood frozen on the courtyard steps, his bodyguards flanking him like shadows made flesh. "Boss!" Marco, his right hand, reached for the weapon at his hip. "Want me to?" "No." The word fell like a guillotine blade. Final. Absolute. Antonio crouched slowly, the movement foreign to a man who rarely lowered himself for anyone. The tattoo along his wrist, a serpent wrapped around a dagger, rippled as he extended his hand. The puppy didn't flinch. It stepped closer instead. "Whose dog is this?" Antonio's voice was quiet, dangerous in its softness. Marco exchanged glances with the other guards. "No one's, as far as we know. It appeared at the gates 2 days ago. The groundskeeper tried to chase it off, but it keeps coming back." Antonio's jaw tightened. The puppy placed its small paw on his knee, leaving a muddy print on his €10,000 trousers. He should have been disgusted. He should have ordered it removed. Instead, he felt something crack in the fortress of his chest. "Bring it inside." The command rippled through his men like an earthquake. Antonio Greco didn't keep pets. He didn't keep anything that required softness. His empire was built on steel and silence, on the graves of men who had underestimated his capacity for violence. But tonight, for reasons he couldn't name, he carried a shivering puppy into his ancestral home and didn't look back. The Greco estate sprawled across 12 acres of prime Lombardy real estate, a Renaissance villa that had housed 5 generations of dangerous men. Crystal chandeliers hung above marble floors that had witnessed blood and brilliance in equal measure. Antonio walked through the grand foyer, the puppy tucked against his chest. Water dripped from its fur onto his silk shirt. He could feel its heartbeat, rapid, terrified, yet somehow trusting. "Don Antonio." He turned. Rosa, the head housekeeper for 30 years, stood at the base of the curved staircase. Her eyes widened at the sight in his arms. "Prepare a warm bath," he said, "and find something for it to eat. Milk, soft food, nothing too heavy." "Of course, Don Antonio." Rosa's voice carried the careful neutrality of someone who had learned never to question. He climbed the stairs to his private quarters, the puppy's small body warm against his palm. His bedroom suite occupied the entire east wing, bedroom, study, private bathroom, and a sitting room he never used. Tonight, he used it. He set the puppy on a velvet settee that had cost more than most people earned in a year. It looked at him with eyes like melted chocolate, and something in Antonio's throat tightened. "What are you doing here?" he murmured. "What do you want from me?" The puppy simply wagged its tail, as if he hadn't built an empire on fear, as if he wasn't the most dangerous man in northern Italy, as if he was just a man, worthy of unconditional devotion. Rosa returned with warm towels and a silver bowl of milk. She watched her master, the man who had ordered executions over breakfast, who had built criminal networks spanning 3 continents, gently dry a stray puppy with his own hands. The tattoo at his collarbone, visible where his shirt had fallen open, read Mort prima dishonor, death before dishonor. Yet here he was cradling life instead of ending it. "What will you call it, Don Antonio?" He didn't answer immediately. His fingers moved through the puppy's damp fur, finding the small body beneath the neglect. Someone had loved this creature once. Someone had let it go. The thought made him think of his mother, of everything he had failed to protect. "I don't know yet," he finally said. "Perhaps it will tell me." Rosa retreated quietly, leaving Antonio alone with the small creature that had somehow breached every wall he'd built. He watched it drink the milk with desperate hunger, its small tongue working furiously. When it finished, it climbed into his lap without permission, a transgression that would have cost a man his fingers. Antonio let it sleep there while the rain continued to fall. 3 days later, the puppy had established itself as a permanent fixture of Antonio's existence. It followed him to breakfast, sitting beneath the long mahogany table where his mother presided over the household. It followed him to his study, curling beneath his desk while he reviewed shipment manifests and money transfers. It followed him to meetings with his captains, silent and watchful, as if it understood the gravity of the discussions. "The thing is obsessed with you," Marco observed during a security briefing. "Never seen anything like it." Antonio's hand moved automatically to stroke the puppy's head. It had grown slightly in 3 days, its coat now shining gold after proper feeding and grooming. He still hadn't named it. "Have we identified where it came from?" "Working on it. No chip, no collar when it showed up. Could be from one of the villages nearby. Or could be abandoned by someone passing through." Antonio's jaw tightened. The serpent tattooed along his forearm seemed to coil tighter as his muscles tensed. "Someone threw it away. Likely. Find them." Marco paused. "Boss, I said find them. Whoever abandoned this animal on my property." Antonio's eyes were winter cold. "I want to know who they are." He didn't say what he would do with that information. He didn't need to. His mother noticed the change. Isabella Greco was 73 years old. Her hair silver white and her spine still straight as the stilettos she'd worn in her youth. She had buried a husband, 2 brothers, and countless enemies. Nothing escaped her attention. "You're softer," she said over dinner that evening. "These past few days." Antonio set down his fork. The puppy dozed at his feet, one paw resting on his shoe. "I'm simply tired, Mama." "Don't lie to me, figlio mio." Her dark eyes, so like his own, sparkled with ancient knowledge. "I've watched you since you were smaller than that creature. I know when something has shifted in your heart." "Nothing has shifted. Everything has shifted. You've been walking through this house like a ghost for 3 years. Since..." She stopped herself. The name hung unspoken between them like a wound that wouldn't heal. "Mama, your father's death broke something in you." Valentina's betrayal shattered what remained. Isabella reached across the table to touch his hand, the one with La Famiglia Prima etched into the knuckles. "But this little one follows you like you're its entire world. Perhaps God sent it to remind you that you're still capable of being loved." Antonio said nothing. The puppy stirred at his feet, making a soft sound in its sleep. "Or perhaps," Isabella continued gently, "it's a sign that something else is coming. Something you've been waiting for without knowing it." The next morning, Antonio learned the answer. He was in his study reviewing financial documents when Marco entered, his expression troubled. The puppy looked up from its bed in the corner, a luxury dog bed that had appeared overnight, though Antonio hadn't ordered it. "We traced the dog." Antonio's hand stilled on the paper. "And it belonged to one of the staff, a maid. She was hired 3 weeks ago by Rosa. Passed all the background checks, nothing suspicious." "A maid." Antonio's voice was dangerously quiet. "One of my employees abandoned a puppy on my property? It's complicated, boss." Marco shifted uncomfortably. "The girl, her name is Camilla Rossi, 23 years old. Clean record. She was living in a small apartment in the village before she took the position here. She had to give up the dog to take the job. Live-in staff aren't permitted pets. She tried to find it a home, but no one would take it. So she abandoned it at my gates?" No. She took it to a shelter in Milano. But the shelter was overcrowded. They told her they'd have to put it down if no one claimed it within a week. Antonio felt something cold settle in his stomach. She brought it back, Marco continued. Left it near the estate with food and water, hoping one of the gardeners might take pity on it. She's been sneaking out every night to check on it. She didn't expect. He trailed off. She didn't expect me to find it. No. The puppy padded across the room and sat at Antonio's feet, looking up at him with those trusting chocolate eyes. It had been looking for her, he realized, following the closest connection to its owner. Following him because he smelled of the estate, of safety, of her world. Where is this girl now? Working. 3rd floor. She's assigned to the guest wing. Antonio stood. The tattoo across his knuckles rippled as he flexed his hands. Show me. He found her on her knees. Camilla Rossi was scrubbing the marble floor of the guest wing corridor. Her small frame bent over a brush and bucket. Her hair, dark as midnight, thick and wild, was pulled back in a simple braid. Her uniform was neat but worn, the fabric thin at the elbows. She didn't hear him approach. The corridor was silent except for the rhythmic scrubbing, and Antonio watched her for a long moment from the shadows. Her hands were red from the cold water. Her shoulders carried tension like armor. But there was something in the way she worked, careful, thorough, devoted, that made him pause. This was a woman who gave everything she had to everything she did. Even scrubbing floors. Camilla Rossi. She startled so violently that she knocked over the bucket. Water spread across the marble, soaking the fabric of her uniform, and she scrambled to right it with trembling hands. Don Antonio, I'm so sorry. I didn't see. Forgive me. Stop. She froze, on her knees, dripping, looking up at him with eyes the color of autumn leaves, brown and gold and green, shifting in the dim light of the corridor. Antonio felt the world tilt. He had seen beautiful women. He had possessed them, used them, discarded them when they proved unworthy of trust. Beauty meant nothing to him. But this woman, this girl on her knees with soap suds in her hair and terror in her eyes, she looked at him like she was seeing straight through the monster to something underneath. Something even he had forgotten existed. You're the one who brought the puppy. It wasn't a question. The words fell between them like stones in still water. Camilla's face went pale. Her hands clutched the scrub brush so tightly her knuckles whitened. Don Antonio, I can explain. I never meant to trespass. I was just trying to. Stand up. She rose slowly, water dripping from her uniform. She was small, barely reaching his shoulder, but there was something in her posture that spoke of hidden strength. The strength of someone who had survived things that would have broken lesser souls. I should fire you, Antonio said quietly, for bringing an unauthorized animal onto my property, for sneaking out at night without permission, for lying by omission to my household. Camilla's chin lifted, just slightly, just enough to show she had a spine. Yes, Don Antonio, you should. The response surprised him. No begging, no tears, just acceptance of consequences with dignity intact. But you're not going to apologize. I am sorry for breaking your rules. Her voice was steady despite the tremor in her hands. But I'm not sorry for trying to save him. He was going to die, and he didn't deserve that. Nothing deserves to die just because it's inconvenient. Antonio felt something shift in his chest. Something warm and dangerous. The puppy, he said slowly. You named it. Leo. Her eyes softened for just a moment. I called him Leo, because he was brave. Even when he was scared and starving, he was brave. Leo. The puppy he had been carrying around for days, sleeping beside at night, protecting like it was his own flesh and blood, had been hers all along. Why didn't you say something? When you learned I had taken it in. Camilla's gaze dropped. I was afraid. I thought you would throw him out if you knew he belonged to a maid. And I thought. She stopped herself. You thought what? I thought maybe he was happy. With you. Happier than he would have been with me. I can't give him a proper home. I can barely take care of myself. But you. She looked up, and there was something heartbreaking in her honesty. You could give him everything. Antonio should have walked away. He should have dismissed her, returned to his study, forgotten this conversation ever happened. He was a man of power and violence. He didn't concern himself with the feelings of servants. He didn't stand in corridors having meaningful discussions with women who scrubbed his floors. But he didn't walk away. Instead, he did something he hadn't done in years. He made a decision based on something other than strategy. The dog stays in the house, he said. And so do you. But from now on, you'll have supervised visitation. What? Leo. The name felt strange on his tongue. Right, somehow. You'll see him every day. In my quarters. Under my supervision. Camilla stared at him like he had grown a second head. Don Antonio, I don't understand. Neither do I. He turned to leave, then paused. The tattoo at his neck seemed to pulse as he looked back at her over his shoulder. Be in my study at 6 o'clock tonight. We'll discuss the arrangement. He walked away before she could respond. Before she could see that his hands were shaking. Antonio didn't return to his study. Instead, he walked to the private chapel at the heart of the estate. A small stone room with stained glass windows and an altar that had witnessed centuries of Greco confessions. He knelt before the Madonna, the puppy, Leo, somehow finding him even here, settling quietly at his side. What are you doing to me? He murmured. To the dog, to the painted saint, to God himself. 3 years. 3 years since his father's assassination. 3 years since Valentina, his fiancée, his supposed beloved, had revealed herself as an agent for a rival family. 3 years since he had closed his heart and ruled with nothing but ice in his veins. Now a stray puppy and a penniless maid were dismantling his defenses brick by brick. He thought of Camilla's eyes. The way she had looked at him with fear, yes, but also with something else. Something that looked almost like recognition. As if she saw him, really saw him. Not Don Antonio Greco, capo dei capi, master of an empire built on blood and secrets. Just Antonio, a man kneeling in a chapel, asking heaven for answers he wasn't sure he deserved. She came at 6 o'clock exactly. Antonio watched her enter his study. Watched her take in the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the massive mahogany desk, the fireplace crackling with warmth. Leo bounded across the room the moment he saw her, and Camilla dropped to her knees to catch him. Leo. Oh, Leo. I missed you so much. The reunion was painfully tender. The dog licked her face, whimpering with joy, and Camilla laughed. A sound like bells in the darkness of Antonio's world. He stood by the window, watching. The tattoo on his forearm caught the firelight as he crossed his arms. He missed you too, he said quietly. Camilla looked up, her cheeks wet with tears she clearly hadn't meant to shed. I don't understand why you're doing this, Don Antonio. Why you're being so kind. Is that what this is? Kindness? I don't know what else to call it. Antonio moved closer, slowly, giving her time to retreat if she wanted to. She didn't. I'm not a kind man, Camilla Rossi. I've killed people. Ordered deaths with less thought than most people give to choosing wine with dinner. I've built my life on violence and control, and I've never apologized for it. She should have been terrified. She should have cowered. Instead, she met his gaze steadily. I know who you are. Do you? I know what the world says you are. What the newspapers print. What the villagers whisper when they think no one's listening. She stroked Leo's fur, her hand trembling slightly. But I also know that you saved my dog. That you carried him inside instead of leaving him in the rain. That you've been caring for him with your own hands when you could have handed him off to any servant in this house. Antonio felt exposed. Raw in a way he hadn't experienced since childhood. What does that tell you about me? That maybe. Camilla hesitated. Maybe the monster isn't all there is. Days passed. Then weeks. The arrangement became routine. Every evening at 6, Camilla came to Antonio's study. She played with Leo while Antonio worked at his desk, and gradually, so gradually neither of them noticed at first, the visits grew longer. She started asking questions. small ones at first, about the books on his shelves, about the Renaissance paintings on his walls, about the history of the estate and the family who had built it. He found himself answering, not with the clipped commands he gave everyone else, but with actual conversation, sharing stories of his grandfather's wine business before the family turned to darker trades, telling her about his mother's roses, which she had planted 40 years ago and still tended with her own hands. "You love her very much," Camilla observed one evening. "Your mother." Antonio set down his pen. Leo was asleep at Camilla's feet, and the fire had burned low. "She's the only person who has never lied to me, the only person who has never wanted something from me beyond my existence. That must be lonely. I'm a powerful man, Camilla. Loneliness is the price. Is it worth it?" The question hung in the air between them. No one had ever asked him that before. No one had ever dared. "I used to think so," he said slowly. "I used to believe that strength required isolation, that letting anyone close meant giving them power over you. And now," he looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the woman she was becoming to him. Not a maid, not a subordinate, something else entirely. "Now I'm not sure of anything." His mother saw it before anyone else. "You're looking at her differently," Isabella said during their weekly private dinner. "That girl, the one with the dog." Antonio didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Her name is Camilla." "Camilla." Isabella rolled the name on her tongue like tasting wine. "You know her name. You say it like it matters." "It does." "Antonio." His mother's voice softened, the sharpness of the matriarch fading into something more maternal. "I lost your father to this life. I've watched you close yourself off, become harder with each year. But I've also seen you these past weeks. You smile more. You spend less time locked in your study with those terrible ledgers. You've been present." "It's nothing, Mama. It's everything, figlio mio. And you're lying to yourself if you think otherwise." Antonio couldn't sleep that night. He stood at his bedroom window, watching the rain streak down the glass. Leo was curled on the bed behind him. The dog had migrated from his settee to the bed a week ago, and Antonio hadn't had the heart to stop him. He thought about Camilla, about the way she laughed, rare and precious, when Leo did something ridiculous, about the way she listened when he spoke, truly listened, as if his words mattered beyond their utility, about the way his heart raced when she was near. This was dangerous. He knew it was dangerous. A man in his position couldn't afford attachment, couldn't afford vulnerability. His enemies would use anyone he cared about against him, had used someone against him before. Valentina's face flashed through his mind. The woman he had loved. The woman who had smiled while she betrayed him. The woman who had passed information to the Conti family for 3 years before he discovered the truth. He had ordered her death, watched it happen, felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Could he ever trust again after that? Could he trust Camilla? A woman who had appeared from nowhere, who had inserted herself into his household, who had somehow become essential to his happiness in a matter of weeks. The questions haunted him until dawn. The incident happened 3 weeks later. Antonio was hosting a meeting of the family's senior captains in the formal dining room. Important men from important territories, each one deadly in his own right. Camilla was among the staff serving the meal. He had specifically requested her presence, though he told himself it was coincidence. His mother attended as well, sitting at the head of the table opposite him. Isabella Greco was technically retired, but no one in the organization forgot that she had run the family for 8 years after his father's death, until Antonio came of age. The Conti expansion must be addressed. Victor, his captain in Rome, was saying, "They're pushing into our shipping lanes, testing boundaries. Then we push back." Antonio's voice was cold steel. "They know the cost of aggression." "Don Antonio," Victor hesitated. "There's also the matter of their new representative. A woman. She's been making overtures, suggesting a partnership." Antonio's hand tightened on his wine glass. The tattoo across his knuckles rippled. "What kind of partnership?" "Marriage. To one of their sons. They want to unite the families." End the conflict. No. But. I said no. The words cut through the room like a blade. The Greco family doesn't kneel. And we certainly don't marry our enemies. The silence that followed was absolute. Then his mother spoke. Perhaps we should discuss this later, Victor. In private. Isabella's tone was soothing, diplomatic. My son's feelings on the Conti family are complicated. Complicated. That was one word for it. After the meeting, as the captains filed out, one of them lingered. Roberto Marchetti was a man of Antonio's age, handsome in a careless way, with wandering eyes and a reputation for indulgence. He ran the family's operations in Florence and had always chafed under Antonio's rigid command. Beautiful women you have serving in your house, Roberto commented, his gaze tracking Camilla as she cleared the table. That one especially. Where did you find her? Antonio felt something dark coil in his chest. She's a member of my household staff. Not a subject for your observation. Oh, come now, Don Antonio. We're all friends here. Roberto's smile was oily. Surely you wouldn't mind if you what? The temperature in the room dropped. Roberto's smile faltered. Nothing. Just nothing. Antonio stepped closer. His presence seemed to consume the available air. Camilla Rossi is under my protection. If you so much as look at her with anything other than respect, I will remove those eyes myself. Do we understand each other? Roberto went pale. Yes, Don Antonio. Perfectly. From across the room, Camilla had heard everything. She stood frozen, empty plates in her hands, watching Antonio defend her honor to a man who could have her fired, or worse, with a single word. The tattoo on his neck pulsed as his jaw clenched. Their eyes met. The moment stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. Something passed in that glance. Something that went beyond employer and employee, beyond protector and protected. Something that felt like destiny. That night, Camilla came to the study as usual. But the atmosphere was different, charged with electricity that hadn't been there before. Leo greeted her happily, but even the puppy seemed to sense the tension. He settled in his bed quietly, watching his two humans with ancient, knowing eyes. Thank you, Camilla said softly, for what you said. To Roberto. Antonio stood by the fireplace, one hand braced against the mantel. The firelight painted shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp planes of his jaw, the intensity of his gaze. He had no right to speak about you that way. I'm just a maid, Don Antonio. Men like him don't need rights to speak about women like me. You're not just anything. The words came out rougher than he intended. You're. He didn't finish. Couldn't finish. Camilla stepped closer. I'm what? I don't know. He turned to face her, and the vulnerability in his expression made her breath catch. I don't know what you are, Camilla. I don't know what you're doing to me. I've spent years building walls, and you're dismantling them without even trying. Maybe. She hesitated, close enough now that she could see the individual threads of his shirt, the way his pulse beat in his throat. Maybe that's what you needed. Someone to see past the walls. You shouldn't want to see past them. What's behind them is darkness. Everyone has darkness. Camilla's voice was barely a whisper. But not everyone has a puppy who follows them like you hung the moon. Not everyone has a mother who looks at them with that much love. Not everyone cares about the feelings of a servant who broke their rules. Antonio reached out, slowly, his hand, the one with La Famiglia Prima tattooed across the knuckles, cupped her face with devastating gentleness. You terrify me, he admitted. Good. She smiled, and it was like watching the sun rise. You terrify me too. The first kiss happened without warning. One moment they were standing inches apart, hearts racing. The next, Antonio's mouth was on hers, and the world contracted to the press of lips and the taste of wine and firelight. It was gentle, questioning, a first step into a landscape neither of them knew how to navigate. When they parted, Camilla's eyes were wide, wondering. We shouldn't, she breathed. I know. I'm a maid. I know. Your family will never accept. Antonio kissed her again. Harder this time. More certain. Let me worry about my family, he murmured against her lips. Let me worry about everything. The secret unfolded slowly. They stole moments together. In his study late at night, in the gardens at dawn, in the private chapel where no one thought to look for the capo and the maid. Always careful. Always hidden. But Camilla knew it couldn't last. Secrets never did. Not in this house. Not in this world. What happens when people find out? She asked one morning, standing in the rose garden. Isabella's roses were blooming in the early spring warmth, their scent heavy and intoxicating. Antonio stood beside her, the tattoo on his wrist catching the sunlight as he reached to touch a crimson petal. They won't. Antonio. It was the first time she had used his name without the title. Felt like crossing a border. They will. Someone will see. Someone will talk. And then I'll handle it. You can't handle everything. You can't control the entire world. Watch me. His arrogance should have infuriated her. Instead, it made her want to cry, because she knew, with the certainty of someone who had learned young that the world was cruel, that this beautiful, impossible thing between them had an expiration date. Men like Antonio Greco didn't end up with women like her. They ended up with daughters of power, strategic brides, women who could advance the family's interests, not girls who scrubbed floors and loved stray dogs. The Conti family made their move a week later. The attack came at midnight. A car bomb in the courtyard, detonating against an empty vehicle but sending a clear message. War was coming whether Antonio wanted it or not. He spent 3 days locked in emergency meetings, barely sleeping, the weight of his empire pressing down on him like a physical force. Camilla saw him only in glimpses, passing in corridors, his face drawn and exhausted, the tattoo at his neck seeming darker against his pale skin. She wanted to go to him, wanted to offer comfort, but she knew her place, and her place was not beside him in times of crisis. On the 4th night he came to her. She was in the servants' quarters, a small room on the 3rd floor, barely larger than a closet. She had been lying awake, listening to the distant rumble of thunder, when the door opened. Antonio stood in the doorway. He looked like a ghost, like a man who had been through war and come out the other side hollowed. I needed to see you, he said simply. Camilla rose from her bed. She was in a simple nightgown, her hair loose around her shoulders. She should have felt exposed, vulnerable. Instead, she felt powerful. Come here, she whispered. He crossed the room in 2 strides and gathered her in his arms. The embrace was desperate, consuming. He buried his face in her hair and breathed her in like she was oxygen. They're going to kill someone I love, he rasped. The Countess. That's what this is about. They want to break me. They want to find my weakness and destroy it. Camilla held him tighter. They won't. You don't know that. I know you. She pulled back to look at his face. I know you'll do whatever it takes to protect the people you care about. And I know... Her voice cracked. I know that you can't afford to care about me. Camilla, I'm your weakness now. Don't you see? If anyone finds out how you feel, they'll use me against you. They'll hurt me to hurt you. Then I'll keep you safe. You can't protect me from your entire world. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I should leave. I should go before. No. His grip on her tightened. I won't lose you. I've lost too much already. I won't lose you too. Antonio, I love you. The words fell into the silence like stars falling from the sky. I love you, Camilla Rossi. I love you in a way I didn't know I was capable of. I love you with a heart I thought had died 3 years ago. And I will burn the entire world to the ground before I let anyone take you from me. The revelation came 3 nights later. Antonio was in his study, reviewing security footage with Marco. Leo was asleep at his feet as usual. The puppy had become a permanent fixture, accepted now by the entire household as an eccentric extension of their capo's personality. There's something you need to see, Marco said quietly. About the girl. About Camilla. Antonio's blood ran cold. What about her? The background check we ran when she was hired, it was clean. But I did some deeper digging after you took an interest in her. Looked into her family history. And, Marco hesitated. In all their years together, Antonio had never seen his right hand hesitate. Camilla's father was Enzo Rossi. The name hit Antonio like a bullet. Enzo Rossi, his father's former driver, his father's trusted confidant, the man who had died in the same explosion that killed Antonio's father. The world tilted, shifted, reformed itself into something darker and more complicated than Antonio had ever imagined. Enzo Rossi had a daughter, he said slowly. I didn't know. Neither did anyone else. He kept her hidden, off the records, raised by her grandmother in a small village up north after her mother died in childbirth. He visited when he could, but he never told anyone in the family. Why? Protection, probably. He knew what this life does to children. He didn't want her anywhere near it. Antonio's hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against his desk to steady them, the tattoo across his knuckles stark against the dark wood. Enzo died saving my father. And my father died anyway. His voice cracked. And his daughter has been scrubbing my floors. It gets worse. How could it possibly get worse? Marco placed a photograph on the desk. It showed a young Camilla, maybe 16, standing beside her grandmother's grave. Behind her, watching from the shadows, was a face Antonio recognized. Valentina. The Conti family has been watching Camilla for years, Marco explained. After Enzo's death, after her grandmother passed, Camilla was alone, struggling. The Contis could have approached her at any point, recruited her, used her against you the way they used Valentina. But they didn't. No, they're saving her for something bigger. We intercepted communications last night. They know about your relationship with her. They know she matters to you. Antonio felt the world narrowing to a single point of focus. What do they want? They want you to choose. Turn over control of the northern shipping routes, or they'll take her. When? Soon. They're planning to move within the week. Antonio stood. His chair scraped against the marble floor. Leo woke with a start, looking up at his master with confusion. Double the security on the estate. Triple it on Camilla. No one gets near her without my permission. Done. And Marco? Yes, boss. Prepare for war. He went to her that night. Camilla was in the servants' dining hall, sharing a late meal with some of the other staff. She looked up when he entered, her eyes lighting with the warmth that had become his anchor in the storm. But the warmth faded when she saw his expression. Everyone out, Antonio commanded. The other servants scattered like leaves in the wind. Within seconds, they were alone. What's wrong? Camilla rose from the table. Antonio, you're scaring me. Your father. The words tasted like ash. Your father was Enzo Rossi. She went still. Utterly, completely still. How do you know that name? Because he worked for my family. Because he died with my father. Because you've been under my roof for weeks, and you never thought to mention that you're the daughter of the man who gave his life for mine. Camilla's face crumpled. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't even know if you would remember him. Remember him? Antonio's voice rose. He was like an uncle to me. He taught me to drive. He taught me to shoot. He was the last person to see my father alive. And he was my father. Tears streamed down Camilla's face. He was my father, and I lost him too. And when I found out who you were, when I realized whose house I was working in, I didn't know how to face you. Because you got to grow up with him. You got to have him in your life. And I only had letters, photographs, stories from my grandmother about a man I barely knew. Antonio felt the anger drain out of him, replaced by something deeper, something aching. Why didn't you come to us? After he died? We would have taken care of you. I didn't know. My grandmother didn't want me anywhere near this world. She made me promise to stay away, to build my own life. But then she died, and I had nothing, and the only lead I had was this estate. Camilla wiped her eyes. I didn't come looking for money or revenge. I came looking for answers. I came looking for some connection to the father I never got to know. And instead you found me. Instead I found you." Her voice broke. "And I fell in love with you. And now everything is ruined." Antonio crossed the room and took her in his arms. "Nothing is ruined," he whispered fiercely. "Nothing. Listen to me, Camilla. I don't care about the secrets. I don't care about the complicated history. All I care about is you. But the Countess, they know. I know they know. And I'm going to handle it." "How?" He pulled back to look at her face. The tattoo at his collarbone seemed to pulse with his heartbeat. "Do you trust me?" It was the question that mattered most. The question that everything depended on. Camilla looked at him. This man of power and violence. This man who had shown her more tenderness than she had ever known. This man who loved her despite everything. "Yes," she said. "I trust you." The next 7 days were a whirlwind of preparation. Antonio fortified the estate, brought in additional men, set traps and countermeasures that would turn any invasion into a bloodbath. He barely slept, running on espresso and determination. But every night he found his way to Camilla. They didn't speak much during those nights. Words felt insufficient. Instead, they held each other in the darkness, memorizing the weight and warmth of each other's bodies, storing up reserves of love for the battle to come. "I should tell you something," Camilla said on the 6th night. They were in his bedroom, the first time she had been there. Leo sleeping peacefully at the foot of the bed. "You can tell me anything." "The puppy." "Leo." She hesitated. "Do you know why he followed you?" "That first night. He was lost, looking for food." "No." Camilla's voice was soft. "He was looking for my father." Antonio frowned. "What do you mean?" "My father used to wear a particular cologne. Cedar and bergamot. Very specific. My grandmother gave it to him when he got the job with your family. He wore it every day. Said it made him feel professional." She took a shaky breath. "When I brought Leo home as a puppy, my grandmother still had a bottle of it. She'd spray it on his bed sometimes to help him sleep. She said it was like having my father there." The realization hit Antonio like a wave. "I wear the same cologne." "I know. I noticed it the first day I met you. And I think Leo noticed it too. I think he followed you because you smelled like safety. Like the only father figure he ever knew." Antonio looked down at the sleeping puppy. At the small creature who had somehow led him to the woman he loved. Who had been searching for a ghost and found a future instead. His eyes burned. "He was bringing me to you," he whispered. "This whole time. He was trying to bring me home to you." Camilla nodded, tears streaming down her face. And Antonio, the most dangerous man in northern Italy, the man who had ordered deaths and built empires and never once shed a tear, finally broke. He wept. For his father. For Enzo. For the lonely puppy searching for love in a cold world. For the woman who had found him despite everything. The attack came at dawn on the 7th day. Antonio was ready. The Conti forces breached the eastern wall, expecting to find a sleeping household. Instead, they found an army waiting. The battle was brutal, brief, decisive. Antonio fought with a ferocity that would become legend. The tattoo across his knuckles was stained with blood by the time the sun fully rose. Men fell before him like wheat before a scythe. And when it was over, when the last Conti soldier lay dead or captured on his ancestral grounds, Antonio walked through the carnage like a king surveying his kingdom. "Find their leader," he ordered Marco. "The one who gave the order to touch her. Bring him to me alive." The Conti underboss was named Francesco. He was 50 years old, silver-haired, dignified in his defeat. Antonio met him in the courtyard. The same courtyard where Leo had first appeared. The same courtyard where everything had begun. "You threatened someone I love," Antonio said simply. "You tried to use her as leverage against me." Francesco laughed bitterly. "That's how this game is played, Greco. You know that better than anyone." "No." Antonio stepped closer. "That's how it used to be played. The rules are changing." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I'm tired of war. Tired of blood. Tired of losing people I care about to the endless machinations of men like you. Antonio's voice was ice. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to your family. You're going to tell them that the Grecos are done fighting. We'll honor existing territories. We'll maintain peace. But if anyone ever threatens Camilla Rossi again, I will personally dismantle your organization from the ground up. There won't be negotiations. There won't be warnings. There will only be extinction. Francesco stared at him. You'd give up expansion for a woman? I'd give up everything for her. The words rang through the courtyard, true as any oath ever sworn. Francesco seemed to recognize something in Antonio's eyes. Something beyond strategy, beyond power, something like love. You're serious, he breathed. Deadly. Francesco nodded slowly. I'll deliver your message. Whether they accept it, they'll accept it, because the alternative is oblivion. Antonio turned away. Now get off my property. Camilla was waiting in the chapel. She had spent the entire battle there, guarded by 4 of Antonio's most trusted men. Leo clutched in her arms. She looked up when Antonio entered, and the relief that washed over her face was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Is it over? It's over. She ran to him, threw herself into his arms. He held her so tightly that he could feel her heartbeat against his chest. Rapid at first, then gradually slowing as she realized they were safe. I was so scared, she whispered. So was I. You? Scared. Terrified. He pulled back to look at her face. Do you know why? She shook her head. Because for the first time in my life, I had something worth losing. Someone worth fighting for. And the thought of failing you, the thought of anything happening to you. His voice cracked. It was more frightening than any battle I've ever faced. Antonio. I love you, Camilla Rossi. I love you with every broken piece of my soul. And I want. He stopped, steadied himself. I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I deserve you. But before she could respond, the chapel doors burst open. Isabella Greco stood in the entrance, her silver hair disheveled, her face pale with fear that transformed into relief as she saw her son alive and whole. Antonio, thank God. She rushed to embrace him, and Antonio held his mother with the tenderness that had always existed beneath his iron exterior. I'm all right, Mama. It's over. The Countess. Defeated. They won't trouble us again. Isabella pulled back, studying her son's face. Then her gaze shifted to Camilla, who stood a few feet away, Leo still in her arms. And this one. Isabella's voice was neutral, careful. Antonio straightened. The tattoo on his knuckles caught the candlelight as he took Camilla's hand. This one, he said firmly, is going to be my wife. He has just proposed. His mother is watching. Camilla hasn't answered. And somewhere in the shadows of the estate, a surviving Conti soldier reaches for a hidden weapon. His sights set on the woman Antonio has just declared his future. What happens next will change everything. The silence in the chapel was absolute. Candlelight flickered across ancient stone walls, casting dancing shadows over the faces of the 3 people frozen in this moment. Isabella's expression remained unreadable. The mask of a woman who had survived decades in a world where showing emotion could mean death. Camilla's hand trembled in Antonio's grip. Her heart hammered against her ribs so violently she was certain everyone could hear it. Leo squirmed in her other arm, sensing the tension that crackled through the sacred space like electricity before a storm. Your wife, Isabella repeated slowly. The words hung in the air like smoke. Yes. Antonio's voice held no uncertainty, no room for negotiation. I've made my decision. Antonio, this girl is the daughter of Enzo Rossi, the man who died protecting our family, the man who was more loyal than half the captains in our organization. Antonio stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Camilla, protective, claiming, she has more right to stand in this chapel than most of the people who've passed through these doors. Isabella's dark eyes, so like her son's, shifted to Camilla, assessed her, weighed her. Is this what you want, girl? Do you understand what you're agreeing to? Camilla lifted her chin. The fear was still there, but something stronger had risen alongside it. Something that felt like purpose. I understand that your son is a dangerous man, Signora Greco. I understand that loving him means accepting a life most people couldn't imagine. But I also understand. Her voice cracked slightly, then steadied. I understand that he's the best man I've ever known. And if he'll have me, I'll stand beside him until my last breath. The words seemed to shift something in Isabella's expression. The older woman studied Camilla for a long moment, taking in her simple servant's clothes, her work-roughened hands, the small dog clutched against her chest. Taking in, too, the steel in her spine and the fire in her autumn-colored eyes. Then Isabella did something unexpected. She smiled. Enzo's daughter, she murmured almost to herself. I should have seen it. You have his stubbornness, his quiet strength. She crossed the chapel floor and took Camilla's face in her hands. A gesture so maternal, so tender, that tears sprang to Camilla's eyes unbidden. Welcome to the family, figlia mia. Antonio released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. But the moment of peace shattered before it could fully form. The gunshot came from nowhere. One moment, the three of them stood in the golden candlelight. The next, glass exploded inward from the chapel's ancient window, and Camilla felt something hot graze her shoulder. She screamed. Antonio moved faster than thought. He threw his body over Camilla's, driving them both to the stone floor. Leo yelped and scrambled free, darting behind the altar. Isabella dropped beside them with the practiced ease of a woman who had survived assassination attempts before. Stay down, Antonio commanded. His voice had transformed, no longer the tender lover, but the ruthless capo. The tattoo on his neck seemed to pulse as his jaw clenched with barely contained fury. Another shot rang out, then another, and then silence. Marco's voice echoed through the shattered window. Got him, boss. One of the Conti soldiers. Must have been hiding during the sweep. Antonio didn't move from his position over Camilla's body. His hand pressed against her shoulder, and when he pulled it back, his palm was stained red. You're hurt. It's nothing. Just a graze. But Camilla's voice shook. The adrenaline that had carried her through the moment was fading, leaving trembling shock in its wake. It's not nothing. Antonio's eyes were wild, the controlled mask finally cracking to reveal the depth of his fear beneath. You could have died. You could have. But I didn't. Camilla reached up with her uninjured arm and touched his face. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. He gathered her against his chest so tightly it almost hurt. But Camilla didn't complain. She buried her face in his neck, inhaling the cedar and bergamot that had started this entire impossible journey, and let herself believe they might actually survive this. The doctor arrived within the hour. Camilla's wound was indeed superficial, a shallow furrow along her upper arm that required cleaning and bandaging but no stitches. She sat on the edge of Antonio's bed while the physician worked, gritting her teeth against the sting of antiseptic. Antonio refused to leave her side. He stood by the window, watching the estate grounds with the vigilance of a hawk, the tattoo on his forearm catching the lamplight every time he shifted position. The last of the Conti soldiers has been dealt with, Marco reported from the doorway. We've done a complete sweep. The estate is secure. Double the patrols anyway. I want eyes on every entrance, every wall, every shadow. Done. And the message to the Conti leadership? Delivered. Francesco survived to carry it personally. They're pulling back across the board. Marco hesitated. Boss, if I may, you did it. We won. Antonio didn't respond. His gaze remained fixed on the darkness beyond the window. Only when the doctor finished and departed did he finally turn back to Camilla. The tension drained from his shoulders, replaced by something almost fragile. I almost lost you, but you didn't. I can't. His voice broke. I can't go through that again. I can't watch someone I love get hurt because of who I am, what I do. Camilla rose from the bed, ignoring the throb in her arm. She crossed to him, small and fierce and utterly unafraid. Then let me make something clear. She took his hand, the one with La Famiglia Prima inked across the knuckles, and pressed it to her heart. I'm not going anywhere. Not because I'm naive about the danger. Not because I don't understand what this life means. But because I choose you, Antonio Greco. I choose this. All of it. He kissed her then. Not gently. Not tentatively. This kiss was claiming. Desperate and consuming. Filled with all the fear and relief and overwhelming love that had been building since the first moment their eyes met. Camilla rose on her toes, her uninjured arm wrapping around his neck. She felt the heat of him through his ruined shirt, felt the thunder of his heart against her own chest. When they finally parted, both breathless, Antonio rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said again. Not a question this time. Promise. A vow. Marry me, Camilla Rossi. Tomorrow. Tonight. As soon as I can make it happen. Yes. The word was barely a whisper, but it changed everything. The wedding preparations began at dawn. Isabella Greco took command with the efficiency of a general marshalling troops. Within hours, the estate had transformed. Fresh flowers appeared in every room. Roses from Isabella's personal garden. White lilies imported from somewhere. Greenery that softened the ancient stone walls. Camilla watched it all unfold with a sense of unreality. 3 months ago, she had been scrubbing floors. 2 months ago, she had been sneaking out at night to check on an abandoned puppy. 1 month ago, she had been falling in love with a man who should have been her enemy. Now she was about to become his wife. You're thinking too hard. She turned to find Isabella standing in the doorway of her newly assigned room. A guest suite on the 2nd floor, far grander than anything Camilla had ever occupied. I'm thinking exactly the right amount, Camilla replied with a small smile. Considering how quickly my life has changed. Isabella moved into the room, her elegant silk dress whispering against the marble floor. She carried something in her hands, a small velvet box that looked ancient. I want to give you something. She opened the box to reveal a necklace, a delicate gold chain holding a pendant shaped like a rose, its petals set with tiny rubies. This was my mother's, and her mother's before that. It's been passed down through generations of Greco brides. Camilla's breath caught. Signora, I can't. You can. And you will. Isabella's voice was gentle but firm. You're family now, Camilla, which means you carry our history, our traditions, our strength. This necklace is part of that. She moved behind Camilla and fastened the chain around her neck. The pendant settled against Camilla's collarbone, cool at first, then warming against her skin. My son loves you, Isabella said softly. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Not even... She stopped herself. Not even Valentina? The name hung between them. The woman who had betrayed Antonio. The wound that had nearly destroyed him. That wasn't love, Isabella said firmly. That was an illusion. A performance. What Antonio feels for you, what I see in his eyes when he's near you, that's real. She turned Camilla to face the mirror. Remember that in the days to come, when this life becomes difficult, and it will become difficult, remember that you have something true. The ceremony took place at sunset. The chapel had been restored since the morning's attack. The broken window covered, the scattered glass swept away, fresh candles lit along every surface. The space glowed with warm golden light, transforming the sight of violence into something sacred. Camilla walked down the aisle alone. She had no father to give her away, no family to witness her transformation. But as she moved through the candlelight, she felt her father's presence anyway. In the scent of cedar and bergamot that filled the air, in the small golden dog who trotted faithfully at her heels, in the man waiting at the altar with tears in his eyes. Antonio wore a black suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, the power contained in his frame. But his expression held nothing of the ruthless capo. In this moment, he was simply a man watching the woman he loved walk toward him. The tattoo at his collarbone was visible above his open collar. Mort prima dishonor. Death before dishonor. But looking at Camilla, his eyes said something different entirely. Love before everything. The priest was Father Benedetto, an elderly man who had served the Greco family for 40 years and learned long ago not to ask questions. "We are gathered here," he began, "in the sight of God and these witnesses, to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." Camilla barely heard the words. She was lost in Antonio's gaze, in the intensity of his focus, the vulnerability he showed only to her. "Do you, Antonio Matteo Greco, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do." His voice was steady, certain. "Now and forever." "And do you, Camilla Maria Rossi, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Camilla felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Happy tears. The first happy tears she had cried in years. "I do. With all my heart." Father Benedetto smiled, a genuine expression that softened his weathered face. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." He turned to Antonio. "You may kiss your bride." The kiss was gentle this time, tender, a promise rather than a claim. Antonio cupped her face in both hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears, and kissed her like she was the most precious thing in his world. Because she was. When they parted, the small gathering erupted in applause. Isabella dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. Marco stood stiff and formal but couldn't quite hide his smile. The household staff, many of whom had worked alongside Camilla just weeks ago, cheered with genuine happiness. And Leo, confused by the noise but sensing the joy, barked once and wagged his tail so hard his entire body wiggled. "My wife," Antonio murmured against Camilla's ear. "Mine." "Yours," she agreed. "Always." The reception was intimate by Greco standards. Only family and trusted associates gathered in the great hall, sharing food and wine and toasts to the newlyweds. But for all its restraint, the celebration held genuine warmth, a reminder that even in the darkness of their world, light could still find a way in. Camilla circulated through the room on Antonio's arm, accepting congratulations from men whose names she would need to learn, whose loyalties she would need to understand. The weight of her new position was beginning to settle on her shoulders. She was no longer Camilla the maid. She was Donna Greco, wife of the capo, lady of the house. It was terrifying, but every time the fear threatened to overwhelm her, Antonio's hand tightened on her waist, a silent reminder that she wasn't alone. Near midnight they escaped. Antonio led her through a hidden passage she hadn't known existed, a narrow corridor that wound through the estate's ancient walls and emerged in a private garden she had never seen. Moonlight silvered the roses, a fountain murmured in the darkness, and above it all, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. "I didn't know this place existed," Camilla breathed. "No one does. My father built it for my mother when they were young. A place for just the two of them." Antonio pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her from behind. "Now it's ours." They stood in silence for a moment, drinking in the peace. After the chaos of the past weeks, the revelations, the attacks, the frantic wedding preparations, this stillness felt like a gift. "Are you happy?" Antonio asked softly. "Happier than I've ever been." She turned in his arms to face him. "Are you? I didn't know happiness felt like this." His voice was rough with emotion. "I'd forgotten." "Then we'll remember together." She kissed him, soft at first, then deeper as the emotion built between them. His hands slid into her hair, pulling loose the elaborate style Isabella's maids had created. Her fingers worked at the buttons of his shirt, seeking the warmth of his skin beneath. "Camilla," his voice was strained. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He carried her through the garden to a small stone cottage hidden among the roses. Inside, the space was simple but beautiful. A large bed draped in white linens, candles that seemed to light themselves as they entered, windows that looked out onto the garden's moonlit expanse. Antonio set her down gently, reverently. His hands shook slightly as he reached for the zipper of her gown. "I've dreamed of this," he admitted. "Every night since I first touched you." "Then stop dreaming." Camilla helped him slide the dress from her shoulders. "And make it real." What followed was tender and passionate and overwhelming. Antonio worshipped her. There was no other word for it. He mapped every curve of her body with hands and lips, murmuring Italian endearments against her skin, treating her like she was made of something precious and rare. And Camilla discovered that beneath the armor, beneath the reputation, beneath the tattoos that marked him as dangerous, Antonio Greco was capable of devastating gentleness. He held her as if she might break, touched her as if she were sacred, loved her as if she were the only thing in the world that mattered. Because to him she was, later, tangled together in the white sheets. Camilla traced the tattoo across his chest. Cor di Leone. Heart of a lion. "When did you get this one?" "The day my father died." His voice was distant, lost in memory. "I was 22. I wanted something to remind me that courage wasn't just about fighting. It was about surviving, about continuing. And this one," her finger moved to the serpent on his forearm. "After Valentina, the snake that bites is the one you let close." His jaw tightened. "I swore I'd never let anyone close enough to hurt me again. But you let me close. You were different." He turned to face her, propping himself on one elbow. "You didn't try to get close. You didn't scheme or manipulate. You were just there, real, honest." His hand cupped her cheek. "You made me want to be brave in a different way." "What way?" "Brave enough to love again. Brave enough to trust." He kissed her forehead. "Brave enough to believe I deserved happiness." Morning came too soon. Camilla woke to sunlight streaming through the cottage windows and Antonio already awake, watching her sleep. She stretched lazily, feeling the pleasant ache of the previous night. "How long have you been staring at me?" "Hours." He smiled. A real smile, unguarded in a way he never was with anyone else. "I wanted to memorize this moment, in case it turns out to be a dream." "It's not a dream." She reached up to touch his face. "I'm really here. I'm really yours." "I know." He caught her hand and kissed her palm. "I'm just having trouble believing I deserve it. Then I'll spend the rest of my life convincing you." The weeks that followed were the happiest of Camilla's life. She settled into her role as Donna Greco with surprising ease, largely thanks to Isabella's patient guidance. The older woman took Camilla under her wing, teaching her the intricacies of running the household, the politics of the organization, the subtle ways a wife could support her husband without ever appearing to interfere. "You have natural instincts," Isabella observed one afternoon. They were reviewing household accounts in Isabella's private sitting room, Leo dozing at their feet. "Your father would be proud." "Do you really think so?" "I know so." Enzo was one of the most intuitive men I ever met. He could read a room in seconds, adjust his approach accordingly. "You have that same quality." Camilla felt a warm glow at the comparison. Every connection to her father, no matter how small, felt precious. "Can I ask you something, Signora?" "You're my daughter now. Call me Mama." The word caught in Camilla's throat. "Mama," she managed. "Can I ask, what was he like? My father? When he worked here?" Isabella's expression softened with memory. "He was kind, loyal, completely devoted to this family, even when that devotion cost him everything." She paused. "He used to bring Antonio chocolates from the village. Every Saturday without fail. Antonio would run to meet him at the gates." Camilla's eyes burned. "I never knew that. There's so much you didn't know. So much he couldn't tell you to keep you safe." Isabella reached across and squeezed her hand. "But you're here now. You're part of his legacy. And I believe that somewhere he's watching over you, proud of the woman you've become." Antonio's duties kept him busy during the days. The aftermath of the Conti conflict required careful management, renegotiating territories, reassuring allies, rebuilding what had been damaged. He spent hours in meetings, on phone calls, reviewing reports that arrived at all hours. But every evening, without fail, he came home to her. Sometimes he was exhausted, barely able to speak. Other times he was wired with tension, needing physical release that Camilla was happy to provide. But always, he held her before they slept. "I never knew it could be like this," he confessed one night. "Coming home to someone who actually wants me here." Did Valentina not? Camilla stopped herself. Valentina was a performance. Everything about her was calculated. His arms tightened around her. "You're real. You're messy and complicated, and sometimes you argue with me about things that don't matter. The kitchen renovation matters. It really doesn't. The stove is from 1978, Antonio, and it works perfectly fine." She laughed, and he smiled at the sound. That rare, genuine smile that still made her heart skip. "I love fighting with you," he said. "I love that you're not afraid of me, that you push back when you disagree. Someone has to keep your ego in check. My ego is perfectly reasonable. Your ego is massive. My ego is earned." She kissed him to shut him up, and the argument dissolved into something far more pleasant. The trouble started on a Tuesday. Camilla was in the garden, cutting roses for the dining room, when she first felt it. A wave of dizziness so intense she had to grab the nearest trellis to stay upright. Leo barked with concern, circling her ankles. "I'm fine," she assured him. "Just stood up too fast." But it happened again at lunch, and again during tea with Isabella. Each time, the room spun briefly before stabilizing. "You're pale," Isabella observed. "Have you been sleeping well?" "Yes, fine. Another wave hit, and Camilla pressed her hand to her stomach. "Actually, I don't feel well. Would you excuse me?" She barely made it to the bathroom before losing her lunch entirely. The doctor came the next morning. Camilla had wanted to wait. Surely it was just a passing illness. But Antonio had noticed her pallor and insisted. He sat beside her on the bed while the elderly physician conducted his examination, his hand gripping hers with barely contained anxiety. "Well?" Antonio demanded when the doctor finally straightened. "What's wrong with her?" The doctor's weathered face broke into a smile. "Nothing at all, Don Antonio. Your wife is in perfect health." "Then why is she sick?" "Because she's pregnant." The world stopped. Camilla heard the words but couldn't process them. Pregnant. She was pregnant. She was carrying Antonio's child. She looked at her husband, saw the way his face had gone utterly blank, the way his hand had tightened convulsively on hers. "Pregnant," he repeated. "You're certain?" "Quite certain. Perhaps 6 weeks along. Still very early, but the signs are unmistakable." The doctor began packing his bag. "I'll want to see her regularly throughout the pregnancy. Special care should be taken given the stress of recent events. But if all goes well, you should expect a healthy baby by spring." He left them alone with the news. For a long moment, neither spoke. Camilla watched Antonio's face, trying to read the emotions flickering behind his eyes. Fear? Joy? Shock? "Antonio?" Her voice trembled. "Say something." He turned to look at her, and for the second time since she'd known him, she watched tears spill down his cheeks. "A baby," he whispered. "We're having a baby." "Yes." He gathered her in his arms so suddenly she gasped, but the embrace was gentle, almost reverent. His hand moved to her still flat stomach, spreading across it as if he could somehow touch the life growing inside. "I'm going to be a father." Wonder colored his voice. "I'm going to have a child with the woman I love. Are you happy?" "Happy." He pulled back to look at her face. "Camilla, I didn't know it was possible to feel this much. I didn't know my heart could hold this much love." She started crying then. Happy tears that mixed with his, and they held each other for a long time, mourning nothing and celebrating everything. The household received the news with overwhelming joy. Isabella wept openly, clutching Camilla's hands and blessing her in rapid Italian. The staff offered congratulations that ranged from formal to effusive. Even Marco, normally stoic, allowed himself a genuine smile. "A Greco heir," he said. "The family will rejoice." But the joy was tempered by new concerns. A pregnant wife was vulnerable in ways that a regular wife was not. Antonio's protectiveness, already intense, escalated to levels that bordered on suffocating. "I'm pregnant, not dying," Camilla protested when he suggested she stop walking in the gardens. "I need fresh air, exercise. You need to be safe. I need to not go insane from being locked in my room for 9 months." The argument ended, as their arguments often did, with Antonio grudgingly conceding, but doubling her security detail as a compromise. Weeks passed. The pregnancy progressed. Camilla's body changed gradually, her waist thickening, her breasts growing tender, her emotions swinging wildly between joy and inexplicable tears. Antonio weathered it all with patience she hadn't known he possessed. "I'm sorry," she sobbed one evening, having burst into tears over a perfectly innocuous comment about dinner. "I don't know why I'm crying. It's the hormones. I can't control it. You never have to apologize to me." He held her close, stroking her hair. "Cry all you need to. I'll be here. I'm being ridiculous. You're being pregnant. There's a difference." She laughed through her tears, and then cried harder because the laugh made her emotional too. Antonio just held her, solid and steady, an anchor in the storm of her fluctuating moods. At 3 months, they told the extended family. The captains and their wives gathered in the great hall for a formal announcement. Antonio stood at the head of the table, Camilla at his side, and delivered the news with quiet pride. "My wife is expecting our first child, an heir for the Greco family." The room erupted in congratulations. Glasses were raised, toasts were made, and Camilla found herself surrounded by women eager to share advice and stories of their own pregnancies. But not everyone's reaction was celebratory. In the corner of the room, barely visible in the shadows, a woman watched with cold eyes. Roberto Marchetti's wife, a thin, elegant woman named Lucia, observed Camilla with an expression that sent chills down her spine. Something dark lingered in that gaze. Something jealous. Something dangerous. Camilla mentioned it to Antonio that night. Lucia Marchetti was staring at me during the announcement. It felt hostile. Antonio's jaw tightened. The tattoo on his neck seemed to pulse. The Marchetti family has always had ambitions above their station. Roberto hoped to position himself as my successor before I married. Successor? But surely, I had no heir, no wife. If I died without children, the family would have needed to choose a new leader. Roberto believed that leader would be him. Antonio's voice was cold. "Your pregnancy changes that. Permanently. So they resent me. Possibly. But resentment is one thing. Action is another." He pulled her close. "I'll have them watched. If they make any move against you or our child, they'll regret it." Camilla wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that the walls of the estate would keep her safe. But the memory of Lucia's eyes followed her into sleep, turning her dreams dark and uneasy. The threat materialized 2 weeks later. Camilla was walking in the rose garden, accompanied by 2 guards as per Antonio's requirements, when she found it. A single black rose, placed deliberately among Isabella's red ones. Attached to its stem was a note. "Some flowers bloom briefly before they die." Her blood ran cold. "Don Antonio needs to see this," one of the guards said, his voice tight with alarm. "Now." Antonio's response was immediate and terrifying. Within hours, the entire estate was locked down. Additional security poured in from allied families. Every servant was questioned, every entrance monitored, every shadow scrutinized. "It's the Marchettis," Marco reported. "We traced the rose to a florist in Florence, Roberto's territory. Someone in his organization sent it. Find them." Antonio's voice was death itself. "Find them and bring them to me. Boss, if we move on the Marchettis directly, it could start another war. The alliance. I don't care about the alliance. I care about my wife. My child." Antonio's hand slammed against his desk. "Someone threatened them. Someone put a death wish in my garden. There will be consequences." Camilla watched from the doorway, her hand resting protectively on her growing belly. She had never seen Antonio like this, not even during the Conti attack. This was beyond rage. This was primal. This was a father defending his family. The confrontation happened 3 days later. Antonio traveled to Florence personally, against Camilla's protests, against his mother's warnings. He took Marco and a contingent of his most trusted men, and he walked into Roberto Marchetti's house like he owned it. Which, in a sense, he did. Don Antonio. Roberto rose from his chair, surprise and fear flickering across his handsome face. I wasn't expecting. No, you weren't. Antonio moved through the room like a storm approaching. Which makes me wonder what you thought would happen when you threatened my wife. I don't know what you're. Antonio's hand shot out and closed around Roberto's throat. The speed was inhuman. One moment he was across the room, the next he had the other man pinned against the wall. The rose, Antonio said softly. The note. Don't insult my intelligence by denying it. Roberto's face went purple. His hands clawed uselessly at Antonio's grip. It wasn't, he choked out. Lucia, my wife. Your wife acts on your behalf. In this family, husbands answer for their households. Antonio's grip tightened. So I'm going to give you one chance, Roberto. One chance to explain why I shouldn't end your bloodline tonight. The explanation, when it came, was pathetic. Lucia had acted alone, driven by jealousy and ambition. She had hoped to frighten Camilla into a miscarriage, eliminating the heir that stood between Roberto and potential succession. I didn't know, Roberto gasped when Antonio finally released him. I swear to God, I didn't know. Then you should control your wife better. Antonio straightened his jacket, the tattoo on his knuckles still visible from where he'd gripped Roberto's throat. Here is what's going to happen. You're going to retire. Immediately. Your territories will be reassigned. You and Lucia will relocate somewhere far from my family. I don't care where, as long as I never see either of you again. But the business, everything I've built, is mine, was always mine. Antonio's voice was ice. Consider yourself lucky I'm letting you leave with your lives. If anything happens to my wife or child, now or ever, that mercy will be revoked. He turned to leave, then paused. And Roberto? If I ever hear the name Lucia Marchetti again, I'll assume it's a threat. And I'll respond accordingly. He came home to Camilla that night. She was waiting in their bedroom, unable to sleep, when the door opened. He stood in the doorway, still in his traveling clothes, exhaustion carved into every line of his face, and looked at her like she was the only light in a dark world. It's done, he said simply. They're gone. They will be by morning. He crossed to her, kneeling beside the bed. His hand found her belly, larger now at 4 months, the swell of new life visible beneath her nightgown. No one will threaten you again, I promise. Camilla pulled him up onto the bed, wrapping herself around him despite the awkwardness of her growing body. I was so scared, she admitted. Not for me, for you, for what this life is making you become. I've always been this. His voice was hollow. I've always been capable of violence, of cruelty. That's not new. But you're also capable of this. She guided his hand to where the baby had started to move. Tiny flutters that grew stronger every day. Of tenderness, of love. Promise me you won't let the darkness consume the light. He was quiet for a long moment. I promise, he said finally. For you, for our child. I'll try. The pregnancy progressed without further incident. Camilla grew larger. The baby grew stronger. A boy. The doctor confirmed at 6 months. Much to Antonio's carefully concealed delight. Names were discussed and discarded. Family traditions consulted. Nurseries prepared. We'll call him Matteo, Antonio announced one evening. After my father. And Enzo, Camilla added softly. Matteo Enzo Greco. For both our fathers. Antonio looked at her with such love it took her breath away. Matteo Enzo Greco, he repeated. Perfect. Isabella threw herself into grandmother preparations with enthusiasm that bordered on manic. The child will need everything, she insisted, presenting Camilla with lists of supplies, furniture, clothing. We must be prepared for any eventuality. Mama, it's still 3 months away. 3 months is nothing. We should have started planning sooner. Isabella consulted her list. The nursery needs repainting, the color is wrong. And the crib we ordered isn't suitable. I found a better one in Rome. And the christening gown. Mama, must be made from the family lace. It's tradition. Every Greco heir has worn it. Mama. Isabella finally paused, looking up. Yes. You're going to be an amazing grandmother. The older woman's eyes filled with tears. I never thought I'd see this day. After Valentina, after Antonio closed himself off, I made my peace with dying without grandchildren. She took Camilla's hands. You gave him back to me. You gave me a future I thought was lost. They held each other for a long moment. The two women who loved Antonio Greco, united in their joy. The baby came early. 8 months and 2 weeks, close enough to full term to be safe, but still unexpectedly soon. Camilla woke in the middle of the night to cramping pain and a wetness she immediately recognized. Antonio! She shook his shoulder. Antonio, wake up! He was alert instantly, years of training overriding sleep. What is it? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. She smiled despite the discomfort. But you should probably call the doctor. Your son is coming. 12 hours of labor followed. Antonio refused to leave her side. Had to be physically restrained from threatening the doctor when Camilla screamed in pain. He held her hand until she was certain she would break his fingers, and he whispered encouragements that ranged from sweet to absurd. You're doing amazing. I'm dying. You're not dying. You're bringing life. Easy for you to say. You're not pushing a watermelon through a keyhole. That's a disturbing image. That's my reality right now. He laughed. A shocked, delighted sound that made her laugh too, despite everything. And then, finally, gloriously, a baby's cry filled the room. Matteo Enzo Greco entered the world at 7:43 a.m. on a spring morning. He was small but healthy. Dark hair like his father, amber eyes like his mother, a set of lungs that could wake the entire estate. The doctor placed him in Camilla's arms, and she felt the world reconstruct itself around this tiny, miraculous creature. He's perfect, she whispered. Antonio knelt beside the bed, his face transformed by wonder. The man who controlled an empire, who had ordered deaths and made millions and never shown weakness, was openly weeping at the sight of his son. He's ours, he said hoarsely. He's really ours. He's really ours. Antonio leaned in to kiss her, soft and reverent, and then bent to press a gentle kiss to his son's forehead. Welcome to the world, Matteo Enzo Greco, he murmured. I promise to spend my life making you proud. The baptism was held 3 weeks later. The chapel that had witnessed so much. Their first meeting, the attack, their wedding, now hosted a celebration of new life. Father Benedetto performed the ceremony with visible joy, blessing Matteo as a new generation of Grecos looked on. Isabella held the baby for part of the service, her face soft with grandmother love. Leo, now fully grown but still utterly devoted, sat at the edge of the gathering, watching his expanded family with quiet contentment. I wish my father could see this, Camilla whispered to Antonio. He can. Antonio squeezed her hand. He's watching. I'm certain of it. She wanted to believe him, looking at her son, at the impossible joy that had grown from so much pain. She found that she could. Months passed. Matteo grew. He had Antonio's intensity from the start, those dark, watchful eyes studying everything around him with unsettling focus. But he had Camilla's warmth too, breaking into gummy smiles at the slightest provocation, reaching for cuddles with everyone who held him. Leo appointed himself the baby's guardian. He slept beside the crib every night, alerting the household to every sound with concerned barks. The sight of the golden dog watching over the sleeping infant became one of the estate's most common and most touching scenes. He thinks he's Matteo's father, Camilla joked. He's Matteo's protector, Antonio corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Antonio considered this. Fair point. A year after Matteo's birth, Antonio made an announcement. They were in the garden, their garden, the secret space his father had built, with Matteo playing on a blanket and Leo standing sentinel nearby. Antonio had been quiet all evening, and Camilla had learned to recognize that particular silence. "What is it?" she asked. "What's on your mind?" "The business." He stared at the fountain, not quite meeting her eyes. "I've been thinking about the business." "What about it?" "I want out." Camilla's breath caught. "What?" "Not completely out. The family will always be the family. But the day-to-day operations, the violence, the constant vigilance, the weight of it." He turned to face her. "I have a son now. I have a wife who deserves better than wondering if I'll come home each night. I want to step back. Let Marco handle more. Focus on the legitimate investments. Be a father." "Antonio." She didn't know what to say. "Is that even possible? Can someone like you just retire?" "Not fully, but I can shift, adapt, build something different." He took her hands. "You changed everything, Camilla. You made me want to be more than what this life demanded. I want Matteo to grow up knowing his father as something other than a killer." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I love you. I love you too." He kissed her softly. "More than I ever knew I could love anyone." The transition took time. Power doesn't redistribute easily, and the criminal world doesn't offer retirement packages. But Antonio Greco was nothing if not strategic, and slowly, carefully, he began to extract himself from the darkest parts of his family's legacy. Marco became his primary face in the shadows. Trusted captains absorbed territories. Legitimate businesses expanded to provide cleaner income streams. The Greco name remained powerful, but its power began to wear different clothes. "You're really doing it," Isabella said one evening, watching her son review real estate investments rather than shipment manifests. "You're really changing." "I'm trying. Your father would be proud." "Would he?" Antonio looked up. "He built the empire I'm dismantling. He built an empire so his family could have choices, so his son could choose a different path if he wanted one." Isabella touched his face, the gesture of a mother, transcending everything else. "He would be proud, figlio mio. Trust me." On the second anniversary of their wedding, Antonio took Camilla back to the cottage in the garden. Matteo was with Isabella, happily playing with his grandmother and Leo, giving them their first extended time alone since his birth. Camilla walked through the roses in a silk dress, feeling like she had stepped back in time. "It feels different," she said. "Better or worse?" "Better." She turned to face him. "Everything is better now." Antonio moved toward her with purpose. The tattoo on his neck, Mort Prima Dissonor, caught the fading sunlight. But when he looked at her, his eyes held nothing of death or dishonor, only love. "I wanted to bring you here," he said, "because this is where everything began, where we really began, not as Don and maid, but as husband and wife. I remember. I wanted to tell you something." He took her hands. "When you walked into my life, I was empty, broken. I had built walls so high I couldn't see over them myself. And then there was a puppy who wouldn't stop following me, and a woman who looked at me like I was worth saving." Camilla's eyes burned. "Antonio, you saved me, Camilla. You gave me back my humanity. You gave me a son, a future, a reason to be better than I ever thought I could be." He pressed his forehead to hers. "I will spend every day of my life trying to deserve you, and I will never, never take for granted the miracle of your love. You already deserve it." She kissed him softly. "You always did. You just needed someone to help you see it." They held each other as the sun set over the roses, the man who had been a monster and the woman who had seen through to his heart. Around them, the estate settled into evening peace. In the main house, a baby laughed at his grandmother's silly faces. A golden dog barked happily. And somewhere, perhaps, two fathers watched over the family they had helped create. Later that night, wrapped in white sheets with Antonio's heartbeat steady beneath her ear, Camilla thought about the strange journey that had brought her here. A job scrubbing floors, puppy she couldn't keep, a man everyone feared and no one knew. "What are you thinking about?" Antonio murmured, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her back. "About fate." She propped herself up to look at him. "About how everything that seemed like tragedy led to this. My father dying. My grandmother dying. Losing Leo. It was all so painful. But if any of it had been different, I never would have found you. The universe works in mysterious ways. It really does." She laid her head back on his chest. "Do you think Leo knew? When he followed you that first night? Do you think he somehow understood he was bringing us together?" Antonio considered this. "I think Leo followed me because I smelled like safety. Because something in his instincts told him I would protect him." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "But I also think there's more to the world than we understand. And maybe, just maybe, your father's spirit was guiding him home. Home to me. Home to us." 3 years later, on a sunny afternoon, a second child was born. A daughter this time, dark-haired like her brother but with her father's intense eyes. They named her Elena Isabella, for Antonio's grandmother and mother both. The household celebrated with characteristic excess. Isabella wept with joy. Matteo regarded his new sister with solemn curiosity. Leo, graying now around the muzzle, sniffed the baby carefully before wagging his tail in approval. "Our family is complete," Camilla said, watching Antonio hold his daughter for the first time. "Complete." He smiled down at the tiny face. "Though I wouldn't be opposed to one more. Let's discuss that after I recover from this one." He laughed, a sound that still made her heart skip, even after years together. The man who had been a monster, the woman who had been invisible, the puppy who had brought them together. None of it should have worked. All of it was perfect. On a spring evening years later, the Greco family gathered in the garden. Antonio and Camilla sat on a stone bench, watching their children play among the roses. Matteo was 10 now, serious and intelligent, showing early signs of the leadership that ran in his blood. Elena was 7, fierce and opinionated, utterly fearless in the way only beloved daughters could be. Leo was gone, had passed peacefully 2 years prior, dying in his sleep at Camilla's feet. She still missed him every day. But his legacy lived on in the family he had created, the love story he had started. "What are you thinking?" Antonio asked, taking her hand. "About endings." She squeezed his fingers. "About how some stories don't really end. They just evolve." "That's very philosophical." "I'm a very philosophical woman." "You're a very wonderful woman." He kissed her knuckles. "And I'm a very lucky man." "Yes, you are." He laughed, and she laughed with him, and the children looked up at the sound, recognizing it, cherishing it, carrying it forward into whatever future awaited. Some stories are about darkness. Some stories are about light. The best stories are about both, and about the love that transforms one into the other. This was that kind of story, and they lived imperfectly and beautifully ever after. The end. Thank you for joining this journey of unexpected love, redemption, and the bonds that connect us across impossible circumstances. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales of dark romance, transformative love, and the courage it takes to let someone past our walls. Until next time.